Welcome to Inside Games, the only gaming news show brave enough to try and get our piece of the $180 billion video game industry.
Yeah, come on. With all the money getting thrown around these days, why can't a random million or two just find its way into our bank accounts?
If only that were the way it worked. It's a very reasonable question.
Thank you.
You know what? Very reasonable, given the numbers we're finally seeing regarding Xbox's Game Pass and Sony's PlayStation Plus subscription services. Both companies slinging around tons of money, and while Sony's in the subscription lead, Microsoft's not really the underdog.
Yeah, underdogs are rarely under worldwide antitrust scrutiny because of a pending $69 billion nice acquisition deal. So yeah, we're not looking at Cinderella here, even though the numbers are fun to compare. Just the girth, the thickness of this deal, Microsoft's pending acquisition of Activision Blizzard requires approval by financial agencies in many world governments, like Brazil, whose Council for Economic Defense releases most of its filings publicly in the interest of transparency.
Good for them.
Yeah.
Confidential information is obviously redacted, but it's given us a unique peek at how money is thrown around behind the scenes. For example, Microsoft finally back in August accused Sony of paying developers directly just to keep their games off of Xbox's Game Pass service.
Sony, meanwhile, argued that Call of Duty as a franchise was too big on its own to belong to any one ecosystem or manufacturer. Brazil's Cade was unconvinced, clearing the acquisition in its most recent filing on October 7th. In closing, Cade also released more documentation from Microsoft that finally reveal exactly how much money Game Pass is making.
According to one chart, Game Pass made $2.9 billion just from consoles in 2021. That's not even with PCs?
Yeah, just console.
Holy hell. That's actually about 18% of Microsoft's total yearly Xbox revenues, which totaled about $16.2 billion. Tweaktown's Derek Strickland points out that during that time range, Game Pass subscribers jumped from 15 to 18 million subscribers.
Yeah, so that gives us just enough information to do some drive-by clown math, kind of gut check the numbers we're seeing. We got $2.9 billion in revenue, averaged between 15 to 18 million subscribers. That gives us a range of $161 to $193 per subscriber per year. Game Pass subs are $15 per subscriber in the US, converts to $180 a year. That's exactly in the middle of this theoretical range. That means the math checks out. These numbers are clown certified approved.
We had no reason to believe that they wouldn't be. I mean, these are the numbers from an actual filing that they have to be truthful about. Just more that if the numbers were off, it would imply that there's more to the story here. Luckily, it's all pretty straightforward. More subs equals more money, and Microsoft is not playing games with the data they're submitting.
I do like the games, though. Like, what could that mean? Like a puzzle. But this isn't nearly dramatic enough. Come on, I'm just making money. Who cares? You're probably wondering, how does that compare to other services? The same report contains some helpful comparisons, which is actually pretty rare. I'm presuming that they're doing this to make the case to regulators in advance that this particular acquisition wouldn't leave Microsoft with a disproportionate share of the whole industry. Well, either way, it means we get more reliable data about the industry, so shoutouts to Brazil again.
Oh, yeah, great job, Brazil. The report said Nintendo Switch Online service brought in $932 million in 2021, while Electronic Arts EA Play had $356 million in revenue. It did not have figures for PlayStation Plus, often considered Game Pass's most direct competitor. But the report said that Sony currently has about 40 to 50% of the market share for game subscription services. That implies PlayStation Plus revenue is somewhere around $3.4 billion. That figure actually checks out with the latest data point released by Sony, who reported $3.6 billion in network service revenue back in February of 2022.
All coming together. So if we wrap all these numbers up into one big comparative package, Game Pass is making about 3 times the revenue that Nintendo Switch Online pulls in, but it's a bit less than PlayStation Plus.
Just barely by about, $500 million?
Yeah, you can lose that behind the couch. Jeez, who can keep up?
Nobody. Hopefully this puts into perspective the kinds of bank Sony's making. They're not even doing day one on their service. Not only is their sub revenue higher, but they get full margin on new releases. That they're getting the PlayStation Plus sub and your $70 when God of War Ragnarok comes out. They're just making it money hand over fist.
Yeah. God of War is going to be good, though. So.
Oh, it is. It's going to be great.
Yeah. And even though the subscription numbers across the two companies are they're close, $2.9 billion for Xbox, $3.6 for PlayStation, the revenue numbers for their gaming divisions as a whole are much, much wider. Sony brought in $24.8 billion in 2021 across their whole PlayStation division compared to Xbox's $16.2 billion.
Microsoft doesn't break down the individual revenue streams inside of the Xbox division like Sony does. So we kind of can't make any more comparative statements there.
Yeah, we can just presume and suppose. We do see Sony's, though. They do report that. So nearly half of all of Sony's revenue came from selling digital games and DLC combined. So yeah, it kind of makes sense when you see those numbers why they wouldn't want to suddenly start giving their first-party games away for free alongside the revenue they're already making on PlayStation Plus.
Of course. Now, there are a couple of points to keep in mind here. One, the figures don't include PC Game Pass. And more importantly, they don't consider expenses.
That's where Xbox's plans kind of gets a little more complicated. So we'll take a more comprehensive look at Xbox's total strategy in a second, but first, a word from our sponsor, Factor. Today's episode of Inside Games is brought to you by Factor, which I've come to rely on in this fast-paced world of gaming news. It's great when I don't have a lot of time between work events. You know, I'm pounding the pavement in those forums and scraping those chat logs for the hot scoops. Sometimes there's not a lot of time to just sit down and savor a meal. So with Factor, since it's already made and I just throw it in the microwave, the time I save cooking or doing meal prep can be used to eat a little more slowly, a little more civilized, you know, enjoy the moment rather than just wolfing down a cold sandwich over the sink. Factor cuts out stressful meal planning and extensive prepping so meals come together in minutes, taking the guesswork out of what to make for breakfast, lunch, or even dinner. It's got the variety too, with meal preference options like keto, calorie smart, and vegan and vegetarian, and more than 27 meal options each week. There is something for everyone. Meal plans offer additional variety with 33 add-ons like smoothies, keto shakes, desserts, and more. It's got variety, it's got nutrition, and most importantly, takes away that free will element so we're not scrambling to our phones to get a greasy burger. Use my link in the description or go to go.factor75.com and use code POG inside60 for 60% off your first box. Once more, that's go.factor75.com. Use code POG inside60 for 60% off your first box. Thank you very much, Factor.
Hey, thank you, Factor. So while it's an eye-popping headline that Game Pass made almost $3 billion last year, we have no idea how much Microsoft spent to achieve that. Maybe it cost them $5 billion. They could be losing money. Maybe their expenses were $10 billion. We don't know. Only a few of the amounts were announced publicly. They scooped up Bethesda for $7.5 billion. And of course, their pending acquisition of Activision Blizzard for $69 billion. Nice.
Yeah. They don't own those assets once they've acquired them. I mean, they do. They have to keep paying payroll and stuff. They're inheriting expenses on top of the buying price. So it's not like they pay their 7.5 and now everything is cream after that. They still have to pay people's salaries and stuff. So also important to bring up. On top of that, there's the theoretical lost value in the day one releases that they put on Game Pass. As we said before, Sony gets to have both slices of the pie there, and their revenue from just digital game sales was $4.6 billion all into itself in 2021. That slice of the pie is probably a bit smaller for Microsoft.
What we do know is that game development is very expensive, and Microsoft has been on quite the acquisition spree over the last few years to increase their roster of studios who will pump out titles for Game Pass.
Yeah, it's not just beefing up their own roster of studios too, they're also paying for individual games to appear on Game Pass. Smaller developers have spoken publicly about how Game Pass has been good for their own sales.
Ethan Gatch of Kotaku tweeted this week that both Microsoft and Sony were spending millions to get Ark Survival Evolved on their respective services.
An interesting game to fight over. Gatch tweeted that Sony paid $3.5 million to make Ark Survival Evolved a March PS Plus game. Meanwhile, he said that Microsoft paid $2.5 million to keep it on Game Pass for the first half of this year, and then $2.3 million to bring Ark 2 to the service when it launches.
Man, people are fighting over Ark.
Yeah, it's nice. All you get to do is sit back and let the checks roll in.
Some developers are finding derivative benefits from Microsoft's investment too, even if they're not getting checks directly. Mike Rose, the founder of No More Robots, credited Game Pass with quadrupling the sales of his game Descenders. He said that, quote, being on Game Pass means that you basically have constant featuring on Xbox. Your game's on the dashboard all the time.
Yeah, so it seems like Game Pass is beloved across the board right now, even if that love is fueled by Microsoft's bottomless tech vaults. And if the Activision Blizzard deal goes through, it's going to get a lot more games in the future. Its value will just keep going up. So I gotta admit, it is nice to see directly smaller companies enjoy the benefits of this, of all that money flying around.
Yeah, no, it really is, especially with developers that we try to care about here on the show. Developers get way more money, and then we get tons of games for cheap. I mean, there's kind of no downside here, and Microsoft's, they're eating it. So it is great right now, but it can turn a little ominous if you think about it on a long enough time scale. So when it comes to spending money, Microsoft has some of the deepest pockets in the world.
They sure do. As a company, Microsoft has a market cap of more than $1.7 trillion. And yeah, it's one of the biggest companies in the entire world. Sony Group has a market cap of $82.6 billion. Nintendo, $48 billion. No, little guy.
Yeah, and I feel so bad for him. Microsoft announced a $22 billion deal to develop headsets for the United States military. They're just doing whatever they want kind of everywhere.
I guess the only thing left is pharmaceutical. But yeah, when you're trying to compare the size of Microsoft versus Sony or Nintendo, there's just not really a comparison there. Microsoft is just many, many, many times larger. That's why Xbox boss Phil Spencer said a couple of years ago that he considered the company's real competition not to be Sony or Nintendo, but other tech giants like Amazon and Google.
And when you look at Spencer's market strategy, leaning on Microsoft's bottomless pockets to outspend and outlast your competition, makes total sense. Companies like Amazon and Google are the only other ones that can operate at the same burn rate that Xbox currently has, just like Stadia with Google.
Yeah, they got tired of that though. Even Google got tired of wasting money, so geez. And yeah, like you brought up, Bruce, that all of this is not even accounting for the inevitability or seeming inevitability of cloud-based gaming. Microsoft's Spencer pointed out that company has billions invested in cloud infrastructure that other gaming companies just don't have.
In 2020, he told the publication Protocol that, quote, traditional gaming companies are somewhat out of position. I guess they could try to recreate Azure, but we've invested tens of billions of dollars in cloud over the years. That's actually why you saw Sony partner with Microsoft a few years back in a vaguely worded release about cloud gaming initiatives and AI solutions. Yeah, that's a very rare partnership between Sony and Microsoft.
Yeah, but Sony sees where everything's heading, and they have to get ahead of the game or they're just going to get priced out. Yeah, so who knows? There could be a future where Microsoft has not only spent out, like burned them all the competition out of the industry, but they also own the network and the technological platform that delivers your games to you. They basically own the internet. And then, once they have that, maybe that's when they decide they don't want to spend so much money on it. And they want to get some of that investment back. And guess where it's going to come from? Yes, from you. And then you're not going to have a choice.
Very chilling, Lawrence. Very chilling vision of the future. It is October after all. Even though tech giants seem to agree that cloud is the future, recent events really haven't felt like it. Google rug pulled Stadia last week, while Amazon Luna continues to go largely ignored. I mean, I forgot that they were even doing that.
Yeah, most people did. I guess it's just going to be there until there's a market, so they just have a foothold ready to jump off from? I don't know.
Yeah, sure.
And our march towards a corpo future continues unabated, if you're wondering. Brazilian regulators did approve the acquisition, and that's, of course, despite Sony's protest that losing Call of Duty might hurt its console sales.
They said in a release that, quote, even if Activision Blizzard's catalog were exclusive to the Microsoft environment, this would not substantially decrease competition in the markets. Doesn't get easier than that.
And while they acknowledge that some PlayStation gamers could switch to Xbox because of the popularity of games like Call of Duty, they, quote, did not find evidence that this alone could translate into a competitive risk for the console market as a whole.
We should note that regulators in the US, the UK, and the EU are all still investigating the Activision Blizzard Microsoft deal, with both Microsoft and Sony throwing around some catty statements to sway public opinion.
Yeah, there was a little back and forth there. It was fun. Yeah, for the moment, hey, we get some drama. We get a ton of cheap games out of it. Game Pass is just getting overstuffed, so Corpo Wars are kind of nice. We're kind of enjoying the benefits right now.
So, Lawrence, how far do you think it'll go, though? Do you think Microsoft will outspend Sony so hard, so large, they're actually going to have to lower prices and offer first-party games on PlayStation Plus? Do you think they're ever going to do that?
I don't know. I don't think they can. I think their business model kind of depends on the return they get. It's kind of like Nintendo. You know, they've found a way, they've tapped into a market that they can get a certain amount of money out of for a certain product. And that market seems happy and Nintendo's making money and that they seem to be good. The thing I worry about, though, is it seems like they've been really exploiting their IP lately. So I wonder if they're gonna like return to the vein a little too much. They're gonna mine it all out. They're gonna like remaster Last of Us 18 times. There's gonna be 15 spin-off series. I wonder if people's tolerance for that is like going down.
Oh yeah, I think it is.
A lot of people were kind of rolling their eyes at the Horizon remake, and that's telling me that Sony's starting to like butt up against the boundaries of what people are willing to tolerate and pay for. So if people just start fully rolling their eyes and huffing at Sony's output, kind of like, it's almost like Star Wars. There's been 18 million series, so no one's excited for the next one. If Sony gets to that point, then they won't have the IP draw anymore, and they won't have the like high spend that they can enjoy. So I think they gotta walk a careful line here. They're stomping on the gas pretty hard, and they're earning a lot of money. And they may burn themselves out though.
If you've been watching Inside Games at all in the last year, I've been saying, hey guys, keep an eye on Sony because they are nickel and diming you. They've been doing it for a long time, and all the things that all the reports we've been releasing about Sony has been telling me that they are squeezing their consumers more and more and more. And that always worries me because I think that means they are now trying to figure out how to optimize me as a consumer. And I don't like that feeling.
Yeah.
I still really love the, buy Game Pass for $10 a month, you get 1,000 games. Like that's awesome. I don't know how long that'll last, but certainly feels way better than Sony like trying to steal an extra $50 out of me on the digital store versus buying it on Amazon. It's just like, it's the worst. And I have been keeping track of this, and I continue to warn you that Sony is slowly falling out of the good graces of the gamer.
Yeah, I think they're going to have to work a little bit harder to kind of present themselves as a prestige brand. Because, every time Microsoft is in there throwing away games, as good of ones as they can get, or they're like doing these huge IP gets, the value proposition starts to feel a little skewed. And you don't want people thinking your thing is too expensive for what they're getting in return. Because then, that's when the perception flips. So I think you're right.
Also, you wrote in the script, you're talking about how corporations are fighting over us, and I love that.
It's nice. It's nice right now, right?
Well, that's the way it should be. If you hate the system, you hate the system. I get it, but that's what it's supposed to be about. I mean, that's what we live in. So they are supposed to fight over us so that our prices go down and we get the best deal. That's the whole point. So I will be very worried. I mean, like, I'll be worried if Microsoft takes over and then all of a sudden they're going to make it so that we don't have Game Pass anymore and we're paying $80 for video games. Like, that's the wrong future. That's not what we're supposed to have when it comes to a free market.
Yeah, and I guess that's the point of antitrust, anti-monopoly. And I tend to agree in this case. It's not so bad. I guess the most direct threat I can think of in the near future is Sony talked about their virtuous cycle, how they rely on that premium they get off their first party sales. If Microsoft comes along and incidentally through Game Pass sort of changes people's perception about the prestige of like a $70 game, if they come along and they release just a ton of I say just, it's not like they've been doing poorly, but like Halo Infinite didn't really have that prestige landing with it. I guess Gears 5 was good, Forza Horizon 5. Those feel like prestige console titles, but it's been a minute. There hasn't really been like a Last of Us kind of like pinky in the air artistic experience. Maybe Hellblade 2 will be that.
Starfield won't be artistic, but it'll definitely be the big giant launch they want.
Yeah, that's a good point. Okay, Starfield is kind of like a PlayStation tier release. But still, I mean, if Sony starts to feel like that model's no longer viable because the perception is that it's no longer viable, that's something I could see being an unintended side effect of all this. Microsoft's just fire hosing money, and suddenly nobody wants to buy a $70 game from Sony anymore. I could see why somebody would look at something like Returnal and say that that's not worth it. But I really liked Returnal, and I'd like that game to exist more. So if there's like a narrow strip of single-player AAA caliber experiences that Sony will no longer be able to make just because the market moves away from it because of trends, that would be a bummer. But, what's Microsoft supposed to do? They're out here trying to win customers, kind of like you said. So I don't know that they can be held responsible for all of that, if it even happens that way.
It's true. So we've elected these patrons as our new cloud-based Corpo overlords.
Corp overlord?
Corp overlords. It's hard to say. Baron 5X, Chase T, Cody Jost, Aaron Fraze, and Ryan Dareberry. Thank you very much for ruling over us with an iron fist.
Good to have those connections, because my patrons are already the world's finest cloud gamers. They're always playing just 5G right from the brain. Brian Cosner, James Bowser, Kyle Heaton, Tony Varela, and the creatures with Nerds Brews Gaming. Oh, just got a win just now.
Oh, nice. Way to go.